get my slide here. First of all, thank you for attending. We really appreciate all of you taking your time to attend. I'm sure you're getting 1,000 webinar requests every day, and there's only so much time in the day, but I hope that what we're going to present here today is something of value to you. We don't want to waste your time. We want to be able to give you something to think about, you know, to make good decisions about your business and things that are out there that you may or may not know, and we're just trying to bring all that to light. So for those who don't know me, my name is Mark Green. I'm co-owner of Stryker Networks. Stryker Networks is a managed services provider providing IT services for small to mid-sized companies. We also specialize in 2 areas. One of them is sorry about that, my bad. One of it is compliancy, and the other one is cybersecurity. And those are the 2 main focuses of this webinar today, cybersecurity and compliancy, because between both of those 2, even though they're mutually exclusive, but yet they still work together, if you don't have that covered, those bases covered within your business, you're certainly susceptible to financial loss as well as potentially going out of business. A little bit about me. I'm a former police officer. I have 15 years of crime scene investigation experience. I'm also a certified computer forensics examiner and also an expert witness in that area. And so between all of that, I've spent over 25 years in the criminal investigation, cybercrime area. And so I think I'm pretty well versed in what you need to do to be able to secure your network and secure your business. And hopefully, again, we have some, tips that'll help you out a little bit. And hopefully this webinar is something that will help you out a lot. Anyhow, today I have Randy joining me, Randy Wubbs, who works for Stryker Networks. I'm going to let him introduce himself because I had to introduce myself. So go ahead, Randy.
Good morning. Again, Randy Wubbs, and Mark and I have actually known each other for, good grief, 30-something years, and we've done some collaborative projects together over time in our own respective industries. But now my role here at Stryker is specifically in client success with cybersecurity and compliance, and that's supported by my experience in the past over all those years in business solutions encompassing risk management of several different kinds, loss prevention, and efficiency. And I've worked in specific industries in the area of insurance and financial services, commercial credit management, and energy demand. And when we look at IT security and compliance, it is essentially kind of the behind the scenes and then again, the crowning jewel to operating a well-run and well-protected business for the long term. So that being said, let's get rolling.
All right, so I'm gonna start it off here a little bit and talk about technology. Just so you understand, every business is a technology business. And what I mean by that is that you are responsible for anything that happens technologically within your company. I'm sure you contract us or you work with us, and we help you maintain your networks, maintain connectivity and internet and your applications and all that. And I understand that, but you have a role in that as well. Every executive, every manager, every staff, every employee has a role in protecting data. Your data, your client's data, data that's within your systems, and even data that you access other people's systems. And so you are responsible for that. And data today, without data, you can't run your business. And we all know that. Whether it's paper data, which hardly anybody has anymore, but certainly the data that you collect is the lifeblood of your company. And what's interesting is how data has really morphed into something much greater than what it used to be. We used to say that money is king, cash is king. Well, actually, data is king. In the next coming years, you're going to find that out. It's going to be way more valuable than the dollar is. And what I mean by that is the person that holds the most data wins. So let me explain that a little bit. So all the data that's been collected for years and years and years, and one of the things that we heard for most of our clients is that we have all this data, we have all this information, but we don't know what to do with it. Well, now there's a lot of companies, and ourselves as well, working with our clients saying, well, let's look at that data. There's business intelligence there, there's analytics there to help us be able to profile our clients, our sales, our employees. All of that information is sitting within the data that you already have. Now, that being said, that data is important information that you don't want to get out into the, out into the dark web or out into the internet and being blasted out there. And so it's really important for you to understand that you need to control that data. You need to have practices in place. You need to have testing in place. You need to have documentation in place, policies, procedures in place to protect that. Because if you don't protect that, and that data gets out there, it can potentially ruin your business. It could ruin your business from an intellectual property standpoint, meaning that it could take all your clients' database, all your clients' information to a competitor who can go ahead and go after your clients, or personal information that could be used for identity theft, or personal health information or protected health information, which is nobody wants that out there. And so now that you understand that, we're going to talk a little bit about what you need to do to help protect that, what we can do to help you with that as well, okay? So reality is that small to mid-sized companies have what the cyber criminals want. They have, you have the data that they want to get so they can monetize it. And their objective is to make money, right? So to make money, they want to grab that personal or that protected health information. They want to get that personal identifiable information from an identity theft standpoint. They want to grab your intellectual properties and your customer data. And we need to make sure that we protect all of that, because every one of those areas can be used against you to potentially put you out of business or in lawsuits or whatever that might be. So there's many different names for that. There's cyber attacks, and there's malware, and there's phishing and ransomware and all that. And so I'm sure you've all heard about that. It's been in the news a lot lately. And I have to tell you, especially during this COVID time, because of so many people working from home and using their home computers and all that, they've now exited the secure area of your network and jumped outside to the personal area. Cyber crime has gone skyrocketed. Because they have more, the bad guys have ways of getting in and getting that data much easier, jumping into a home computer and then jumping onto a client's network, and now they're inside the client's network, and they're using the resources to find and gather all that information. So you need to be careful of that. Now, it used to be said that, I'm a small company. Who wants my data? Who wants my information? I have nothing here. They're going to go after the big companies of the world. The problem is that it's easier for them to get into the smaller companies. Money is money. They're going to get it from the big companies, which, by the way, generally has much greater security measures to prevent outside entities from getting in and gathering that data, where the small companies, as mid-sized companies, don't have either the money to spend or the expertise to be able to protect their clients' data or their own personal data. And so what we're seeing is that the small and mid-sized companies are the ones that are being targeted the most, because they're the easy prey. Again, most owners think that, I'm flying under the radar. Nobody needs my business or my data, my information. What good's it going to do? Well, it does a lot of good, because there's ways from a social network engineering, socially engineering emails and things like that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, that allows them to get into and gather that data. Because whether you think you do or whether you think you don't, you have a lot of clients' data. So things are changing. It's not the same as it used to be. About 43% of data breaches involve small businesses, and that's growing every single year. So we're almost at 50%. So you think 1 out of every 2 people or 1 out of every 2 businesses are going to be subjected to some sort of breach, which is a lot of breaches, right? Again, there's a lot that the cyber thieves have to gain from all of this. And it's money. And I can tell you right now that the FBI statistics says that by 2021, that the cybercrime industry is going to be a $6 trillion, trillion with a T, dollar business annually, $6 trillion annually. That's how much money is made and or lost with cyber attacks, hacking attacks, whatever you want to call it. And it's going to cost you some money in some one respect or another. The question is what are you doing about that? You know, do you have practices in place? Do you have the security in place that you need? Do you have, is anybody testing your network? Is anybody remediating what's being found that's open in the network? You know, these are all the things. Are you documenting everything? Because when something goes to into a lawsuit and goes to trial, the opposing side that's suing you is always going to say, what are you doing? What have you done and what are you doing to protect my client's data that was stolen? Because that's the key part there. If you're not doing something proactive, you're saying, well, we tried this and we're sort of looking at that. They're like, no. You need to do everything you can to protect my client's data. Now my client's data is out there and it's hurting them, it's costing them, you know, X, Y, Z. You're responsible for that. And so, you know, that's something that's very real. Also, like I said, a lot of that information goes into the dark web, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. And that's where all the data is being sold and negotiated, and that's where all the nefarious actors, the bad actors, go in and hang out in the dark web, because that's where they can get all their money. So the people that collect the data nefariously and put that data in an area where they can have a marketplace to sell it is where all the money is transacted. So also the downtime and recovery time is about 23 times greater than the actual ransomware. So if your company has ransomware where somebody comes in, puts some sort of malware on your system, goes and encrypts all your data, so you have no access to any of the data, not only do you have to pay a ransom to possibly pay a ransom to be able to gather and get all that data back, then you have to call in a company, a cybersecurity company, to come in and remediate everything. Replace all the hard drives, install the operating system, install all the data. Hopefully you have some backups, restore from backups. Anyhow, there's a cost to that. And part of that cost is in that $6 trillion. It's not just $6 trillion that the bad guys get to extrapolate from you. It's a $6 trillion that they get to steal from you, that they hold you ransom for, and it's all the extra money that you have to pay to get everything back up and running, and the downtime that you're suffered from not having systems in place. What time frame is that going to take? Can I be down for a week? What kind of revenue loss is that going to be for a whole week? You know, it's really important to understand the importance of all of that, right? And just so you know, 60% of all small to mid-sized companies that had a significant data breach go out of business within 6 months. And that's not just because of the cost that it takes, it's the downtime, it's all the other things that Randy's going to talk about, about what it does to the reputation of your company and so forth. So I'm going to take a second here to talk a little bit about the dark web and how that works. So we depict that in a picture of an iceberg. Probably the best way to look at it. And you can see at the waterline, everything above the waterline is where you and I reside. The Netflix of the world, the Gmails, the internet, the Facebooks, you name it. That's where we sit. But there's a much greater, larger part of that whole internet, and that's called the dark web. That's what sits down below the waterline. And that's where there's anonymous message boards. There's online marketplace. I was just talking about a marketplace to be able to exchange and buy data and information, usernames and user passwords and account information and all that. It's where, you know, weapons and counterfeit currency is exchanged. It's where private information is sold all the time. It's where there's other things like human trafficking and pedophiles and terrorists and all that stuff. So there's a whole underworld of the web. And this is where all the nefarious people sit. This is where all that money is transacted and made. And there's no way that you can really prevent it and stop it, because the network that they designed, the Tor server that they designed, it's very difficult to track where it's coming from, because it goes through server to server to server that it distributes. And now you're trying to trace and find it. It's almost impossible. And they know that. And so it's real important. A good example would be medical records usually sell for about 10 times and credit card information sells for about 10 times the value of what it's worth. So there's real serious money to be made in there. Obviously, passwords and other things are in there. So for our clients, that are managed services clients, we constantly monitor the dark web for them. So anytime something new pops up on the dark web, we get alerted, then we remediate, we notify the end user to say, hey, just so you know, your email address or your username and your password popped up on the dark web for sale. Let's look at that. Is this an old password? Is this a password that was hacked from LinkedIn or hacked from, who knows where, Target? There's many different companies that were hacked. Then they go for sale on there. You need to be aware of it, and we think it's important as part of our cybersecurity suite to protect you, to let you know when something pops up there so we can change that password, make sure that we have a good password policy in place, good procedures in place to be able to prevent that. And so all of our forward-thinking clients that are in our managed services are utilizing part of that service to be able to make sure that they're safe and everything else. So again, we talk about different ways of being able to infiltrate and get that information through malware and worms. And one of the number one ways of people getting in is through phishing, email phishing. It's socially engineered. So you receive an email and it looks very legitimate to you, and then you proceed and follow through. And what you're usually doing is several things. One, you're allowing them to install their malware to be able to perform that ransom, to be able to encrypt all your files, or they're going to trick you and in such ways that you send them money, believe it or not. So here's an example. We have a client, or it's a client of ours, the real estate company. And through a phishing email, social engineered email, they sent an email which looked like it was from our client to a title company. And they said, please transfer $120,000, or maybe it was $180,000, I can't remember exactly, to this routing, ABA routing number and account number, and do that immediately for the sale of this property. And so they did that. And they didn't call, they didn't verify, they just sent that money. And so they sent an email back to the end user, our client, and said, hey, by the way, just to let you know, we transacted your $120,000, $180,000. We sent that money, blah, blah. You should be good now. And they look at it and they say, what are you talking about? We never sent you an email. So as we investigated, we looked at the email address, and it was almost the same email address, but it was a little different. There was one letter different. I think there was an S at the end of it. And so through doing that, the end user looks at it and says, oh, this is from a client that we know, and they're asking us to do this. It's a little unusual. We normally don't do this, but let's go ahead and do it. And they send it out. Now that money's gone. That money went overseas somewhere, who knows where it's at, and it's gone. Now everybody's pointing fingers saying, but you sent me the email. And they said, but no, we didn't. That email was not from us. If you would have looked at it a little closer, you would have seen it wasn't from us. That's your fault. So get everybody pointing fingers. And so this happens all the time. This is how they social engineer emails. They're very smart. Remember, it's a $6 trillion a year industry. They have a lot of resources and a lot of personnel to be able to go ahead and try to get that attack, right? So according to statistics, nearly 69% of data breaches were perpetrated by outside, like I just explained, and 34% involving internal actors, people inside the company trying to either tarnish a reputation or breach data. Salespeople are a great example. They grab the data, put it on a thumb drive, they go to a company, boom, they have a book of business, and they start doing that. And so you have to be aware of not just external traffic, not just, when we do testing, we do penetration testing from the outside to see if there's any vulnerabilities from people, hackers from the outside coming in. But we also test the inside network and look for any vulnerabilities inside to see whether or not data is being moved or changed or thrown into a thumb drive or so forth, and making sure that that network internally is secure as well. 56% of breaches took a month or longer for the organization to figure out it's even there. So when this data, when this malware, I should say, is being installed, unbeknownst to the end user, and again, usually it happens from an employee. Employees need to be trained. They need to understand their part in keeping that data secure. So they're answering an email, they're clicking on a website, or they're saying, yes, I want to get the information for my UPS delivery that didn't make it, and I'm going to install a little application to be able to view that. That's generally malware coming into the network. Now, we can't stop that because the end user is saying, yes, I want you to do this. Yes, please install this on my computer. Once that happens, now that malware is inside. And it's sitting there and it's looking around and kind of rooting around like a worm. That's why they call it a worm. It's worming its way around, looking for ways to penetrate. And at some point, it's like an Easter egg. It opens up and it goes out, it phones home, we call it, goes to the mothership, downloads the software, and starts encrypting all the data throughout the network. And then a window pops up and says, oh, you want your data back? You pay us X amount of dollars. Then, if we don't go through and replace hard drives and wipe things out and all that, we don't know if that little Easter egg is still in there or morphed out to something else where there's 2 or 3 of them and they're waiting to happen again. So we've been involved in clients where they said, this is our 3rd time we've been hacked. 3rd time we've had ransomware. Can you please come in and do whatever you can do to prevent this from happening in the future? We can't afford to keep doing this. And that's one of the things that we do. So it's very important. Again, this is just reassuring what I said. By 2021, cybercrime will have reached about $6 trillion annually. It's not a cumulative, it's annually within that year, right? And again, it can take nearly 279 days to identify and contain a security breach. I'm sure you heard about Target's breach a long time ago. There's been, all kind of breaches out there. And a lot of times, if you ever listen, they said, yes, we know that the breach probably occurred sometime 6, 8, 12 months ago. And so that's how long it takes to find it because it's very well hidden. That worm is moving around and doing things. It's hard to pinpoint it and see it for what it is. Sure, you have antivirus software, you have other protection. The problem is that the cyber criminals are always inventing, morphing, developing new things. We, on the other hand, not us, but our vendors that provide the software, the antivirus software and the anti-spyware software and all that, they don't know and they can't read the minds of what these cyber criminals are doing as far as developing that software. So they have to wait for it to come out, wait for it to hit somewhere, whether it's Europe or here, it doesn't make a difference. Then they can identify it, and then they can work on a fix, and then they can push the fix out to prevent it. So by that time, that thing is propagated pretty well. And so we're always a step or 2 behind, just to kind of let you know. Again, it's a Trojan horse. The reason they call it a Trojan horse is because, like they did in Troy, oh, this is a great gift from our adversaries who left. We're going to bring it in and we're going to mount it somewhere, put it somewhere. And then what happens at night, it opens up, people come in from the inside of it, go in and destroy Troy, right? And so the Trojan horse is the same way. It comes in, it's very inviting. You think that it's what you want to do, and then what happens is at a certain period of time, it kind of opens up and starts working, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about HIPAA and understand what that's all about and what the covered entities are responsible for and what the physicians and the practices are responsible for. And I know some of the people on the call here are physicians and have facilities that are compliant, or I'm sorry, they have to be compliant through the HIPAA regulations. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. And one thing that's a little bit different right now for all you people that have practices, their telemedicine is part of HIPAA. Telemedicine was never really designed to do what we're doing with it today, but because of the COVID-19, the Office of Civil Rights for Health and Human Services have decided to relax the enforcement. They haven't made an exception. They're relaxing the enforcement of telemedicine. So it allows doctors to be able to reach patients through Zoom, WebEx, whatever media that you might have, and be able to try to work with, diagnose, talk, interact with their patients. Most of that interaction is done in a way that's not very secure, coming from computers that are generally not very secure. But because of the times that we're in right now and the seriousness of doctors needing to be able to diagnose, talk to, and meet with their patients, they've allowed to relax that for the time being. Now, that won't be forever, but that's how it is right now. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there and let you know that as soon as this COVID-19 thing goes away or subsides somewhat, that telemedicine is going to lock back in again. And so you're going to have to look for telemedicine applications that are compliant with HIPAA, and we can help you with that if you need to do that. So as we know that within HIPAA, we know that doctors, physicians, hospitals, clinics, treatment facilities all need to be in compliant with the HIPAA regulations, as well as some not so well known like correctional facilities, jails, or drug trial providers. They're all fall under the HIPAA regulation. So in order for HIPAA to be able to, in order for you to be compliant with HIPAA, and anybody that you work with, that's your practice management application, that's your IT vendor, that's your medical transcript company, waste medical transport, all of those people need to have, and they fall under what's called the business associate agreement. You need to have a BAA with all vendors, and it needs to be current. And if you don't, you need to make changes to do that. We can help you with that if you don't have forms to do that. So what the BAA says, and what we have with our clients is our BAA says that we understand our responsibility for accessing your network where there might be that protected health information residing. We'll also do everything we can to help you secure that and keep it encrypted at rest, encrypted in transit, and encrypted at rest at the other side. We'll do our best to make sure that that's all done, and we understand what our obligations are as we access, work with you on your computers, work with on the servers, and on your network. And in return, you're recognizing that we are a vendor that you're allowing to access that network and be able to do that work with. And so it's real important to do that. Sorry, I wanted to say one last thing. Also, subcontractors to our vendors, our subcontractors, the ones that we work with, we have to have a BAA agreement with them in place before they can do work for our clients, which we have a BAA with. And that also goes for our clients where we back up their software, back up all their files to the cloud or to our data center. So our data center we have to have a BAA with our data center that says they're compliant with HIPAA. They have security in place, they have encryption in place, they have firewalls in place, they have firewalls on top of firewalls in place to say your data is secure here. It's also encrypted, so if it were to be grabbed, it's still safe because encrypted data can't be accessed. But we do everything that we can to make sure that from the beginning, you, to us, to anybody that we work with, to any of the application software vendors, we have to have those BA agreements with that. So it's very important. If you want to talk a little bit further about that, you can reach out to me directly and I'll be happy to talk to you about that. So we're talking about some obligations under the HIPAA. And again, HIPAA laws are vague at best, but as time goes on, they're starting to be very, very much more well-defined. And I think with this COVID-19, they're going to define it even more. And so we're talking about to mitigate the risk. We're always talking about that. And so in order to do that, you have to test often, you have to remediate any issues on a regular basis, and you have to document what you're doing. And you have to rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. You have to keep doing that all the time. So if something happens and there's an inquiry, you have the paperwork and the documentation that says we have been testing regularly to make sure. We have BAAs in place and we have documents that show that. We're training our staff on a regular basis and we have documents to prove that. We're doing all the things that we need to do. So if you're coming after us and you're going to try to fine us, we're going to stand up and say, no, 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 no. We are doing all these things. Yes, something may have occurred. We've tried everything. We're doing everything possible, but as you know, and as I know, it's impossible to stop hacking and attacks. Nobody can do it for right now. And so that is a risk that's going to happen. As a matter of fact, the FBI statistics used to say back in 2018, it was about 40-some% of all small to mid-sized businesses were going to suffer some sort of attack or hack. In 2019, it went up to 97%, and in 2020, it says not if, but when, which means that everybody's going to suffer some type of an attack down the road. The question is, how well can you mitigate it? How well can you recover? And are you doing anything at all and everything at all that you can to protect that? So you need to test, remediate, document, and rinse and repeat on a regular basis. Just a couple of quick examples and then we'll move on. Here's in 2020, March of 2020, there was a single doctor practice, a small doctor. Again, getting back to where you're saying that, you know, the HIPAA fines only go to large hospitals and large organizations, or only the large organizations get attacked and hacked. And it's not true at all. So in 2020, this single doctor practice was fined $100,000 for failure to conduct accurate and thorough risk analysis, testing, and remediation, and fail to have adequate security measures in place. So what that means is that you have to test and see what's open, remediate, fix those holes or those security risks. Then you have to document that you did all of that, and then document your remediation as well to say, no. We are doing everything we can to mitigate those security risks as much as possible. And it's pretty hard to get fined for that when you say, oh yeah, you've done everything you possibly can to mitigate that risk. In 2019, a Tennessee imaging practice was fined $3 million. Again, these are going to be smaller entities now, right? To fail to conduct, accurate and thorough risk analysis, kind of the same thing. That they didn't have any BAAs with any of the third parties. That's a clear violation of HIPAA. So the BAAs are easy. We can get that in place, and then the testing and the remediation and the documentation under the compliancy side of what we're doing is something we can really help you with. And again, if you have questions about that and you want to talk a little bit more about that, reach out to myself or Randy. There'll be a slide, I think, at the end that'll have our contact information, and we'll be happy to talk to you about that and answer any of your questions. The blame game, there's always the blame game. The blame game says there's a breach and there's a problem. And you're being now investigated by investigated by HIPAA, let's say, the HIPAA organization in general. They're investigating and they're saying, hey, you have a breach, you have a problem, or you had a breach and there's more than 500 records and you have to present that to the Health and Human Services. And so what you're going to say is like, wait, you guys are IT companies. It's your responsibility to make sure that we don't get hacked and that we don't lose client information or patient information or anything like that. The answer really is we have a certain area. We have a certain responsibility. If we did something that opened up a breach or did something where we mishandled your patient's data, then yes, we have some responsibility in that. And we do have cyber insurance, and our policies will handle some of that. But just so you know, you are solely held responsible for any HIPAA violations within your control. So pointing the finger to a managed service provider like us doesn't get you off the hook. You have the responsibility. So if we come to you and say, we're recommending that you need to do this, this, and that, and you say, I'm sorry, that's too expensive for me. That's something that I don't want to do right now. I'll take the risk. That risk falls back to you. And unfortunately, we're not going to be held responsible for that. Our job is to make sure our house is clean and that we do everything that we need to do properly to handle your client's data and handle your client's protected health information, as well as give you and inform you and teach you, which we're trying to do here, to be in compliant. And it's up to you after that. We can't force you to do anything that you need to do. We have to make you aware of it. We don't want something to happen to where it happens and we say, oh yeah, you should have probably done this, or you should have had a better this, or put this software in, and they would say, but why didn't you ever tell us about that? Why are you telling us about that now? And so it's our job to inform you, to keep coming to you and saying, hey, here's what we're seeing out there. Here's ways to fix that or mitigate it or prevent it, whatever the case may be. And it's up to you to make those decisions. So again, you need to make sure that you have that BAA in place and that you are trying to do everything that you can to do the best job you can to protect that information. Okay, and so next is we're going to talk a little bit about what's on the line for you as a business. What can happen to you as a business if you were to be breached, if you were incompliant? And by the way, you need to understand about compliancy a little bit. I'm sure Randy's going to talk about this, and I'm probably jumping into some of the things he's going to talk about here. But they're changing the way that consumers are being protected from security and businesses as well. New York has their own rules and laws. California has their own rules and laws that supersede HIPAA, SOX, GLBA, all of them. And so it's a level of security to protect the data. We have all of these different entities. They said, you know what? No. We want to come in and bring it way up to here. And this is the level you need to be. And so you need to be in compliance with that. And so in being in compliance, you have to go through certain things to demonstrate that you're in compliance if you want to do work with anybody in New York and anybody in California. So if you're an Illinois-based company and you do work with a client in New York, you're responsible and obligated to have the security in place that New York requires. Florida is right around the corner from that. California has one as well. And so if you're doing any work in those areas, you need to make sure you're compliant. I will tell you, though, there's an overall movement within our House of Representatives. There's a bill that's put forward there that is going to supersede all the other regulations that we have right now. And that has bipartisan support, and we think it's going to be passed within the next 6 months. So even though the states have their individual, this is going to supersede all that. This is anybody that's doing any work in the United States, whether you're foreign or local, you have to be in compliance with this level of compliancy, this level of security, this level of data protection, policies, procedures, training, and all of that. And I know nobody likes to be regulated. I get that, and I understand that. But this is a $6 trillion a year industry that's costing people their houses, their personal information, their identity, all these damages to the point where somebody's got to come in and say, you know what? It's not the wild, wild west anymore. It's not a free-for-all anymore. We have regulations in place. We don't enforce them very well. We give, like HIPAA, 7 years to get their act, all the physicians to get their act together. Now they're starting to have penalties and fines. They say, no, we need to act on this now. Data is king. People that have your data is going to have power over the people that don't have the data. And that's a problem right now. And that's what we're trying to, that's why we're here, to help you navigate through all of that and help you to get in compliance. So I'm going to turn it over to Randy. He's going to go through the rest of the slides. And then I'm going to come back and talk a little bit and summarize it all up. And then we're going to have a series of question and answers. If you have any questions at all, put it in the Q&A spot in the Zoom call here, and we'll be happy to answer them at the end. So Randy, take it away.
And you were saying too about the I guess the web effect of regulations, and we're going to get to that too. And even if you have clients that are overseas, like the one we were talking about the other day, we're going to do work with. They have a location in Italy and where else? England.
I think so.
Yeah. So there are some far-reaching obligations that a lot of people don't realize they have. But you think about the real-world consequences to your organization, what you built over all the years. Pick three, depending on the industry that you're in. And what's really on the line, we've had our clients tell us that, is the potential losing everything that you've worked for over all these years. And what a lot of people depend on you for, both professionally and personally, the decisions you make, how you've built the business. And I know that everybody on here is a very savvy business person. They're proactive. That's why you carved out this time today, and we thank you for that. And again, reminder of the data that we shared earlier. We're not making this stuff up, guys. I mean, it's just, it comes from sources that are measuring this. It's not just urban legend, but the complexity and the cost of being hit and hit hard like this. Even when you don't know it, the complexity and the cost drives 60% of small businesses out of business within 6 months because they can't withstand it, or they finally just throw up their hands and say, we're done. We don't have the resources of a big company. And it's a nightmare. And it's really unfortunate. You know, we have a wonderful opportunity in this country to build something, and it's gotten better over the last number of years. And then there are people who could care less about what you've done, willing to tear it down if they can get the keys to the kingdom digitally. So, and again, our objective here is really just to provide you with business intelligence, what we know, what we've learned, what we see coming on the horizon here to help you make best decisions as you navigate and work through the current situation and for whatever's next. And as we know, there's always something next. Fair statement? So what happens after a breach, a theft, or a loss of a device holding sensitive information? I mean, you hear about this all the time. Phones, tablets, computers getting either lost, you know, with no fault of the person, they just lost it, they left it someplace, or stolen, or even, you know, the people that can hack into your system sitting in a Starbucks, if you're not on a little VPN, if you're trying to work remotely. But the data breaches trigger compliance audits, and that creates a demand. They're knocking on your door for, as Mark was talking about, the data and compliance documentation. And if you are subject to HIPAA, they can ask you for 6 years worth of information. 6 years, prove what you're doing to us. Mm-hmm. That can make people scramble. And then, of course, there's a whole, attorneys, it's a love-hate situation. And I mean, I know, and you people realize this too, that there are whole fields of specialty.
Careful, Randy, we have an attorney on this.
I know we do. But some, when they're doing their job, now when you're doing your job, okay, let me skip to another note on this. The attorneys that specialize in data breach laws are standing for the victims of data breaches who've had their information stolen from unprepared and unprotected companies. Mm-hmm. And that's why I said we want to give you the business intelligence to move forward the best way you can. We're not assuming that you're unprepared or unprotected, but if there's a nugget you can take out of this or something you can pay it forward to other people in your industry, in your circle of influence who you know and respect and who are proactive like you, then I think we've done our job to help inform you. Mm-hmm. But cyber insurance is important to have, you know, given the rapidly evolving compliance landscape of today that we've talked about. But the key is the fine print on insurance policies, insurance applications, whether it's health or life or property or cyber. It revolves around minimum practices, what you're required to do. You got to do your part so you're an acceptable risk to the insurance company. And a lot of them refer to it as what's called due care, and that has everything to do with your cybersecurity and compliance best practices. Mm-hmm. Again, it's essential to have now because you spend money to insure things in every other area of your business. And if you don't have it, we can help you in gaining coverage, maybe be an advisor for you on this and point you in the right direction, or we can review an in-force policy that you may have to be sure that it's aligning and it's suitable with where you're at and where you're going in your business. So security and compliance are actually two different things, and we'll just unpack those briefly. We appreciate your time and hanging in here with us. They require completely different approaches. And as you all know, especially the folks that we're working closely with, we solve for data protection and storage and management with digital and mechanical devices. Compliance, on the other hand, it's formally defined as a process of conformity in fulfilling official requirements. And those are requirements that are set by others outside of your organization, very industry specific. But the bottom line is it comes down to doing the right things and proving that you've done them. At any point, proving that you've done them, having things right at your fingertips. And you're having to meet requirements that are set by others. There's multiple layers, and they affect a lot of different aspects of your enterprise, whether it's policy requirements that are in the drawer, you hope you'll never use it, contractual obligations with your business vendors, if you're a contract manufacturer for defense or healthcare or government or education, you're holding on to a lot of information that you may or may not know is sensitive and is regulated, as Mark was saying. And again, the federal and state laws overlay everything. And living in the real world, we know that those don't get any looser or easier to comply with. But this is a critical piece here. And I think the common understanding from what we've heard is that unless you're in a high-profile industry like medical, financial, legal, or high-profile government, that private companies, not so much. You're not really regulated. You're not held to the bigger data laws and regulations and reporting. But the reality is, and again, you mentioned this before, Mark, whenever you hold customer information, you are held to those data breach and privacy laws of the states where they are. Not where you are, but where they are. And this is critically important for serving multi-site national customers. And, you know, you can see the stack of regulations if we put them on the table for the New York Shield Law. California has an equally ominous and increasing set of regulations, both coasts and everything in between. Some of these things have their shorter reporting deadlines, which means, you know, things like when something happens and you find out about it. Some states say, and this is an example, you have 30 to 60 days to inform that person who's been affected. Others say 15 days. And unless you have your finger on the pulse of knowing that, that's going to be picked up in an audit, and it's going to be costly. So a non-regulated business may need the same level of security as regulated businesses. And across all of our stable of managed service clients here at Stryker, we have regulated and non-regulated businesses. And frankly, we treat everybody as they're regulated. We operate at that level of service. But if you're in a regulated business, you've got to be able to prove you've complied with those requirements, and you've got to be able to produce the evidence of your activities. Absolutely. So it's a completely different game plan. But the primary sectors, again, that everybody knows about, you know, come down to healthcare and the vendors and business associates, all disciplines of healthcare. All kinds of licensed professionals, every field where you hold a license, which you've tested for. You have to maintain CEs, you're working with people's sensitive information, education, public and private, right on down to daycare facilities. Local governments, they get hit all the time. And then government and defense contractors and their subcontractors. If you're making a part, if you're making a zipper for a Kevlar vest, if you're making just the smallest things as a supplier, whether you're three lines down the food chain for a defense contractor, there are all kinds of Department of Defense regulations, and most people don't know about it. Again, manufacturing, and we keep bringing that bell, business associates and vendors, they're often not viewed as obligated to comply the same way as their customers, but they are. So IT compliance is multifaceted, just like IT security, and it's got to be updated to continuously refine the process and to produce an archive of documentation, which is required for audits, investigations, or lawsuits. What are people going to say? Prove to us what you're doing because somebody's saying you're not doing it right. Okay, somebody's been injured in this situation. The data and the documentation is the difference between proving that you're doing what you're supposed to do and being dragged through a costly and extended process.
Absolutely.
And one of our mentors says you can't fake it until you make it. You either have it or you don't, and that's absolutely true. But it has to be applied. Compliance has got to be matched and implemented to a very specific set of standards and requirements that are focused on the industry that you're in. So let your eyes glaze over for a minute or two here. There's laws, there's rules, there's frameworks, and a lot of times there are crossovers between these things where HIPAA has laws, HIPAA has rules. The GLBA has crossovers as well. New York covers all of these different frameworks. So if we're not going to bore you with another chart that shows how they overlap, but it is a complex web, and it has a lot of different requirements to it. But security and compliance, we recommend that business owners and CFOs and boards should approach this data and security and regulatory compliance with really the same skills and techniques that you use for any other complex operational area of your company. And I challenge you to ask the critical questions internally and kind of give yourselves a checkup about who's running your cybersecurity and your compliance program and what's their expertise. What kind of and how deep, what level of risk assessments have you performed and how often? And how often do you test your systems against the specific standards we're held to? All of those different charts we showed you. And what checks and balances are built into the system. And then, again, Mark talked about the human factor, which is no security device, no firewall, nothing can prevent a tired, a distracted, or an unaware employee from clicking on some to unleash a disastrous event that you don't even know is going on behind your scenes. So there's different levels of information access within your company, obviously, and that needs to be trained differently and documented. So the multiple legs to the stool, and we know it's a lot to think about, and hopefully we've expanded, your perspective on this. But our challenge would be, again, go with your leadership team, think about some high-level issues to see where you're at today. And then let us help you dive a bit deeper. If there's any question, any concerns, I mean, we'd be glad to just do a checkup with you, get an independent third-party look. And that looks like this. Our call to action, again, the advanced compliance approach will help you enhance the current efforts really to protect your business at a higher level than you're doing now as a complement to your in-house or your outside service provider. And it has two parts. First is the network security assessment, and it's considered valid if it's accurate and thorough. And again, the quotations around that comes from HIPAA documents, comes from a lot of different frameworks that require that it's accurate and thorough. And the reality is it is intended to be done by an outside party. It's actually not fair or not allowed actually to assess yourself, as you can imagine. So again, you got to evaluate your level of compliance for the testing, the documenting, and training. And then the second piece to it is a cyber risk management plan. And everybody has one to some degree, but we want to make sure, and again, we consult with you to make sure it's aligned with the business requirements and the objectives and the risk tolerances and the resources of your company. And cyber liability insurance, again, it's really important to have. It is the missing leg in the stool a lot of times in risk management. And believe it or not, it actually covers business interruption and damages from cyber extortion, fraudulent funds transfers, equipment replacement, digital information recovery, legal and regulatory fees. So there's a whole lot more to it than most people realize.
Okay. Again, thanks again for everybody that's on here. I know a lot of you are clients currently. We're doing a lot of this for you already. We just want to take it to the next level because cybersecurity and compliance are really two different things, but yet they're integrated together, if that makes any sense. And so we need to elevate from the cybersecurity up to compliance. We want to make sure that you're protected from any kind of lawsuits or any kind of penalties or fines from your regulatory agencies. And in order to do that, and in order to also be in compliance with your cyber insurance, which a lot of you have, and I've worked with some of you on there, out there with their cybersecurity policy application, we need to make sure that you're meeting all those obligations because as you know, and I know that insurance companies are their number one mode of operation is to not have to pay a claim for the most part. And so they're going to look and say, okay, are you in the application, you said you were doing this and this and this and this, right? Well, prove to me, show me that you're doing that because you said that you are. You said yes in the application because if they can find out that you're not doing that, you're not getting to training your employees, your end users, if you're not running scans, if you're not monitoring and looking at log files for changes and elevations of security within your network, if you're not monitoring antivirus, all that stuff, which majority of all of you are. Again, you're clients of ours, most of us, and so you're in pretty good shape. But there are some things in that cyber insurance policy that we're not doing. I know we're not. We've had discussions with that, some of you guys. And so we need to make sure, and I'm going to really push, and I'm going to have Randy really push, that we make sure that you stay in compliance. If you're at a level of compliance with, especially with the documentation, and that allows us to review policies and make sure everything's in place and everything is neatly packed. So if anything were to happen, you say, here you go, Mr. Investigator, here you go, Mr. Attorney or Mrs. Attorney, here you go. We have been doing everything that's humanly possible to take care of it. We're training, we're testing, we're mediating, we're documenting. And so we've decided to have a separate entity within Stryker Networks called Cybersecurity Intelligence Group. It's it's a combination of cybersecurity, which still falls on what we normally do, but it's the next level of compliancy. Because we see what's happening, our ears are to the ground, we know what's happening in the states, we know what's happening at the federal level. At some point, this is going to be enacted and you're going to be stuck where you have to do something. So we'd rather get you in that mode and get you there and keep you there so that you don't have any problems. We don't want you to suffer from that. Is it going to cost some money? Yes, and I'm sorry that it is. But the money that you're saving far out exceeds this. Like having insurance, it's like anything else. Nobody wants to buy insurance, but they certainly need it there when something happens. We're so glad we're insured for this. Business interruptus, data theft, other things that come into effect. So we're focusing strongly on this in our company. This is our next thing. We always say, what's next? This is our what's next. We feel strongly about it, and we would love to talk to you about it. So that being said, we're going to offer, as if we would normally offer anyhow, time and no cost to you, obviously, to sit down and talk to you about this. Talk to you about the importance of this. See what you have. Do a little bit of an audit to see what you have in place and see what it is that we can do, if we don't already know that, what we can do to help you get it compliant. Spell it all out for you. And then it's your decision on what you want to do. You need to be aware. Our job is to teach, train, and make awareness there. And it's up to you to take those actions. We can't force you to do that, but we would be remiss if we didn't come out and say, by the way, be aware of this, be aware of that. This is what's happening. Here's what you can do to prevent. Here's what you can do to prevent this. And it's going to change. It's going to keep changing until such time as our intelligence within the software, our artificial intelligence, is to a point on the antivirus, anti-spyware, anti-ransomware, all of that, where there's artificial intelligence enough to be able to see trends and be able to make the changes on their own to prevent that. That's out a little ways. It's not too far away, but it's out a little ways. Until that happens, we're going to continue to see $6 trillion become $7 trillion, become $8 trillion a year annually, because it's still going up. There's still entities out there that haven't been compromised, that still will be compromised. And so this is something that's really important for us. And this is something that we want to, do what we can to kind of help you, mitigate those losses and to navigate. Our job is to help you navigate as best that we can. Like any business, to be successful, when a ship is starting to sink a little bit and you jump into the lifeboats, you need certain groups of people to be successful. You need a leader to say, the land is that way, that's the way you need to go. So that's the confidence that they need. Then they also need that leader to be a champion that says, okay, we need somebody to plug the holes, we need somebody to bail the water, and we need somebody to row. Right. If we don't have somebody leading, encouraging, and then the workers doing those three parts, very all in, if you will, the rowers are rowing, the bailers are bailing, and the pluggers are plugging. If we don't have that, we're not going to make it to that land, and we're all going to die. So we're all in this together. Anybody that's not doing that, there's going to be a problem. So it's kind of the same thing. We're one of those pluggers, rowers, and bailers to kind of help you successfully navigate and stay afloat through all the storms. And that's kind of our job. So hopefully you put some questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.